Welcome to the Webinar Talk Show. I'm Liz Green.
And I'm Tom Singer. Thank you so much for joining us here. Liz and I started this show with the idea of proving to everybody that webinars don't have to be boring, and they certainly can be better than a talking head over PowerPoint.
Absolutely. And Tom, when we started, people were wondering, what is going to happen in the meetings industry? People had no idea whether this virtual event was going to work at all. But we know because we get to talk to amazing people, both in the meeting industry and speakers, about what's really working.
Yep, and there's a lot of things that people are doing to remind their clients, don't cancel your event, because there's a lot of ways you can embrace the best of this virtual world and still have successful meetings. And today our guest is one of those people. Our guest is the author of over 50 sports books, and he keynotes about 100 conferences a year pre-COVID. But of everyone I know in the speaking business, he's working more than anybody because he is really not just a speaker. He's someone who has consulted with his clients to make sure they don't cancel their event, and yet they bring real value. So let's welcome to the Webinar Talk Show, Ross Bernstein.
Woohoo!
Great to see you
Hey,
guys.
Ross, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, awesome to be here, my friend. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of the festivities.
So Ross, I stalk you on social media, so I know that even in this weird world, you're still working a lot for clients. How did you make this change and pivot to virtual?
Well, March hit and all my flights got canceled, my calendar emptied, and it was like, oh, I guess NSA has this Zoom thing that you can buy, so I better buy it and learn how to use it. And that was the beginning of it. It was not something I'd really planned on, but like everyone, we're all just doing what we're doing. And I don't think there's any rules. We're all just kind of making it up as we go along. So there's a lot of people that have different models of how they're doing it, but I love your theme. Don't cancel your event. There's a lot of great ways that we can keep this world moving, and I'm just kind of trying to keep grinding and find my way.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that you have a lot of clients who you've talked to who are like, we don't even know what to do. We're just not going to have the meeting. And I know that your MO in this has been, wait, don't just cancel. Let's talk about reasons to do something. What are some of those reasons that you share with clients?
Yeah, I think it's really important that, I think the planners, the people who hire us speakers are more freaked out than we are because they don't want their events to look bad and get upside down. So, I reached out early on and I still do, and I'm just trying to find ways to make sure that they can still have their event. So, other than just saying, yeah, I'll do it on Zoom, my first choice is always a hybrid event. Mm-hmm. So if we can meet in person, then that's better. And I had a good experience a couple weeks ago. I had 3 live events in California that were all events that we're going to cancel. Mm-hmm. So each one, they were smaller groups, but we were able to, and there's different laws, like in each county in California about how many people they can have and what is acceptable. But each one, I kind of wound up convincing them that it would be better to keep it in person, and you reward those people who are willing to come. So one we wound up having in a vineyard outside of Santa Barbara, which is a really cool setting. It was a great experience. And there's maybe 40 people. And another one was on a rooftop of a company, a balcony overlooking the bay in San Francisco. And it was an autonomous vehicle maker, a lot of tech folks. So they were happy to dial it in as a hybrid and let people stream in. And the other one was for a private equity group for outside in a theater in the round in a redwood forest near Sacramento. And each one kind of wanted to cancel, and I kind of walked them through it. Here's what it would look like. And I think the other thing that's important, just to help them imagine what it can look like safely, responsibly, people wearing masks, doing the right things, having meals outside, which is obviously easier in, California than Minnesota, where I live, or where you are, at least. And so, but the other thing is that I think is really important is to be able to say, if this is an association event, which a lot of our events are, to be able to say, look, if you cancel this, there's a likelihood that your sponsors are going to go elsewhere. They're not going to come back. That money is going to go to a different budget. It's like government spending sometimes. So I think to be able to say, even if you have a placeholder, the event isn't as great in 2020 as it would have been, to do something. And I think that's where I'm finding traction too, is to convince them to say, let's do something.
So Tom and I have talked about hybrid meetings and virtual meetings and looking at them as television shows in the way that we think they should be produced. In the way that we've started talking about hybrid is that it's a television show with a live studio audience. And it's one of those things that when I talk with a client where I use that sort of language, people immediately understand what we mean. And I think it carries, that live studio audience carries a different expectation of how people are going to relate to each other when they're in person, because it's not going to be just exactly the way it was before. So what are you seeing when people are attending these hybrid events in person? Are they acting differently in the way that they did prior to COVID?
It's interesting. I had one last week for an independent community bank and some of their customers. So there were maybe, 50, 60 people in person. It was at a golf course here in Minneapolis. It was cold, but we cracked the doors and got some air flowing in there. People wore masks. Interestingly, everyone was just happy to be there. There was a lot of socialization. Unfortunately, at the end, it did get a little bit when the open bar opened. People kind of gravitated together again, and then you kind of had to, that's when you kind of go, uh-oh, because there's no point in being distance here and then coming together here. Right. But I think people that were there, they felt like they were rewarded. I actually have another client I'm working with. It's a big association event. It's in Orlando. It's in February. And they actually decided they're not doing a hybrid event on purpose. They don't want to, they want to reward the people who are willing to come. And they normally get over 1,000 people that'll attend this, but they're going to have 400. They're going to cap it. And they're going to say, look, the first in, you're going to have a great event. And I think they're realizing that the trade show people, the people that are, which pay for most of our events that we're at, especially if you're at an association, they're the ones who are, they can't network over Zoom. They can't do what they do effectively and build relationships and look people in the eye and shake their hand and have a beer and do the things that we're so accustomed to doing at conferences. So they've decided to say, look, we're just going to reward the people coming. I've got a few events coming up like that where they're just saying, nope, we're not going to stream it hybrid. You have to make an investment and come. So it's great for people that can come, and for others who are high risk that can't, then your heart goes out to those people. But look, the vaccine's coming. We're all going to get there at some point this year. So it's just kind of a waiting game.
So Ross, as a speaker, what are some of the things that you have to do differently if you're virtual or if you're hybrid? What are some of the things you've found? Because you've done a really good job at making this pivot, and you're working a lot. So how do you have to approach it differently than showing up and getting on stage and being charming?
Thank you. Well, for starters, when I'm doing, a virtual event in my worldwide headquarters, or as my mother likes to say, my basement, I have a separate TV that I just roll in here, and I run my slides from back a little ways off my laptop. And that allows me to stand and, get up in the camera and do some things like you guys, where you're a little bit more television quality-esque, right? I decided early on I wasn't going to do like the 5-camera shoot with the 810 mini and all these things where people geek out over all the technology, because I want to be completely self-contained and I don't want any hiccups. So I don't do any screen sharing. It's just me running my slides back there, and I try and make it as interesting as possible. And I'm finding that there's really good engagement. The metric that matters to me the most, and what I'm talking about with my planners who hire me, is how many people started and how many people ended. So I had an event recently where there were like 356 people that started, and they ended with like 348 or something crazy. And they thought that was great to hold their attention for an hour, because as you guys know, people are just zoomed out. They're just sick of it. No one, to be able to hold their attention for a while is good. So physically, that's the big thing. Planning, running my business, I think for all of us, we're just having to be scrappy. Everyone, when March hit, was like, I'll do it for free, hire me, do it for free. And there was just this rush of everyone just throwing their content out there. And that was a challenge. But I think 2020 is more about surviving, just being there for your clients. If it's a chamber, a Rotary, a nonprofit, yeah, it's okay to do those for free. It's okay to help people right now, to reach out and to do that. But I think also you've got to get scrappy. I've had several events that said, look, we have to cancel. It came from the top down, huge Fortune 500 companies said, we have no budget. And I said, look, I don't care. I don't want your people to not have a great keynote, because if it's just all industry people, it's going to be boring. It's going to suck for your attendees. So let me do it. It'd be my pleasure. But I really want to do your annual distributor conference or your sales conference, your leadership conference next year at my full fee. And they're like, wow, you would do that? Of course, it'd be my pleasure. So I think you've got to get scrappy and do a lot of those things to keep your pipeline full, because what I'm seeing now, the biggest detriment to me now is, I'm a pure keynoter. I'm not one of those guys where I've got all the side hustles where I'm monetizing a mastermind or a train the trainer or an email list or I don't do coaching. I just keynote. That's it. So everyone has to lead to the next one. I have to find 100 new clients every year. And when you're not at the event, it's really frustrating because you're not getting business cards, you're not meeting people. That's why this event in California was so therapeutic. In addition to just being on the road again with my wife, just traveling, I was able to stay for dinner, to meet people, go golfing, and I walked out with a bunch of business cards, and I've already booked some new events for next year because I just was able to meet people in person. So I think that's a big part too.
The world has changed quite a bit.
As you sort of alluded to, of these meetings there's a lot of these meetings that are very boring. So what do you do to engage people to keep them there?
Well, I think if you sucked as a speaker pre-COVID, you really suck during COVID. So I don't think homework makes a card for that. Like, there's no magic pill. I mean, you've got to be like you guys. I mean, there's a reason you're really good at what you guys do. You're entertaining. You can make people laugh. You bring content. You do your homework. You're not just showing up, delivering a canned speech. You're interviewing people. You have to do all those things even more. I mean, COVID, you're working 3 times as hard for 3 times less money. I mean, let's face it. That's just the reality of how it is right now. But keep my whole mantra is just keep busy, keep my calendar as full as humanly possible, and this is going to work itself out next year. And I just think that's what you have to do. But, I think now it's really doing the extra personal touch, whether you're going to send that pre-gift box. I have a client that I'm doing that with right now where everyone's going to get a signed, personalized copy of one of my books, and they're going to send a bunch of, they're going to do, it's a big leadership breakfast event out in California coming up, and we're going to do some orange juice from one of their sponsors, an orange grove, and then a bottle of mimosa, or a bottle of sparkling wine, and they're all going to open it at the same time, and they're all going to make a mimosa. We're going to do a cheers, and we're all going to, and then, yeah, and this was actually something for this event too. It was a client in the ag industry, and it was one of the last events I did in February, where I actually went out with my wife in the San Joaquin Valley, and we interviewed like 6-7 farm families, like a vineyard, organic orange grove, and a pistachio farm, and a walnut farm, and one family makes cotton, and it was really interesting. And I was kind of the fish out of water, and I brought all these pictures and told these stories of all the challenges from all the water issues and the government regulations and environmental issues. So I actually pitched them on coming back. And they were going to just and I convinced them to keep it on and actually to make it a hybrid where I'm going to come out in person, re-interview all those families, kind of a where are they now 1 year later, who pivoted, who did well in COVID, why, and then I'm going to be doing it live in a studio with the board members, and then I'm going to host kind of a panel discussion with them to make it even more. It's going to be 90 minutes tight, but it's going to be really good value because they're going to hear what I'm doing. So it's a lot of work, and it's less money, but I kept it on the books, and I'm hoping that there'll be great, spin from all their sponsors who are huge insurance companies and underwriters. So I think that's the kind of stuff, that was stuff that used to be extra. Now that's the price of admission.
So it sounds like you are making the most with the tools that you have.
Yeah, trying. I mean, it's hard, but you just got to get scrappy and try and do whatever you can do.
I'm imagining this in your research and all the books that you've written on winners in sports. I would imagine this is something that relates to that.
For sure. I mean, it's cliche, but there's teams go through adversity, injuries, challenges all the time. I wrote this series of books about why winning teams win, and I'm not trying to shill books, but just to explain what they are. It was a series called Raising Stanley, Raising Lombardi. There's a whole bunch of these where I interviewed like 1,000 professional athletes who were members of championship teams, and I could only ask them why that specific team won. And it was like, Jim Collins did in Good to Great. Like, what was unique? What were these trends and metrics? And every winning team goes through these massive amounts of adversity, and it's how they react to them. So we all, as speakers, we all had previous lives. We all were CEOs or firefighters or airline pilots or sports authors. We all had a previous life before we got into this business. And for me, I could see early on in my business that books were going to be dying. Borders was gone, Walden Books was gone, B. Dalton's, and Barnes & Noble sells more caramel macchiatos, board games, tchotchkes, and greeting cards than they do books. So for me, the pivot was becoming a speaker. I've had books turned into movies and documentaries, so I had to monetize my content differently. Books now are speeches. So I could see early on that pivot. And I think now this is just the same thing. I mean, 08, 09, people, there was a culling of the herd, so to speak, of people that did this and did other things. And so I don't think this is anything new. We've all had to sort of change our business models, and those who do it well they're going to survive. Look, I was lucky. I think that a lot of the tip of the spear speakers in our business, the main stage, 3 to 5 to 10,000 seat venues, those died. And I could see, because I do a lot of those, I lost them in January, February. I was actually in Shanghai in January, and I was like, you could see, because a lot of the international events canceled first. But luckily, I've got a lot of smaller clients. So I think you've got to find that mix now. Now it's about smaller clients, hybrids. If they're going to be in person, it's not going to be these huge events. So I think you have to find that right mix as well.
So Ross, this has been sort of your MO your whole life, because if you go back to 18-year-old Ross, you went to college and you wanted to play hockey. You wanted to play hockey for the University of Minnesota. And I'm not saying you weren't good enough to make the team.
I wasn't good enough.
But you weren't good enough to make the team. So what did you do? What was your pivot? Because I think this is a great example of what we have to do now during these crazy times in the meetings industry or any industry. What did you do?
So that is that was my response. That's my gopher head. I became the mascot, Goldie the Gopher, arch nemesis of Bucky the Badger, because I know one of you two was a former Badger. I won't say which one. But I became the mascot.
I'm still a Badger. I'm still a Badger.
We can all hate the Hawkeyes, okay? We can all hate the Wolverines. We'll find common ground.
For the record,
Big Ten.
An Aztec warrior could take on a Badger or a Gopher, but whatever.
True. Whatever. But I wound up, I had two brothers that actually went to Ivy League business schools at Dartmouth, Tom, where I know your daughter is. And I actually begged my parents to let me use my graduate school money to write and publish a book about the experience when I was 21 years old. So my first book I wrote was called Gopher Hockey by the Hockey Gopher. And it was just this crazy book about this mischievous rodent that got in a lot of trouble. And oh, by the way, I learned it is not appropriate to throw Kraft cheese singles at the Wisconsin band. Who knew?
No, I will say,
just right if you get them, I'm just telling you.
For those of you who may not be hockey fans, the hockey mascots are like, here's regular college mascots, here's college hockey mascots. Like, the ability to skate and skate well in a crazy costume, that is a high level of skill.
Allegedly. And look, Tom Singer, just so you know, hockey for us up here in Minnesota, because we're both from Minnesota, but you're a Texas. Well, no, I don't know if you're originally from Texas, but you live there now. But that's like Texas, you're California. That's like, football to you guys is what hockey is to us. So this is our thing.
Well, but my point being that experience of being Goldie the Gopher, which for some people be like, oh, you didn't make the team. You not only spun that into a great college experience, but then you wrote the book, which really launched an entire lifetime for you. So the message for people is get creative, right?
Totally. Yeah. And that's just it. I mean, we're not going to, not everyone's going to win the trophy, but how do you spin it? And I think there's a lot of those lessons in COVID. I mean, look at how you guys have taken this podcast to the next level. Look what you guys did with our virtual conference. You guys were amazing MCs for that entire event to go virtual. Look at the technology, this platform right now, what we're doing, how you're able to just do this from your home office, what would normally take in a television studio. So we've hyper accelerated our learning curves to become our own AV geeks. And so I think there's going to be some positives, but at the end of the day, I desperately miss my old life. I desperately missed being at our National Speakers Association annual conference, which is our tribe, our people. And I can't wait until we can all get back together. But for now, this is what it is. So we have to make the best of it.
It's true. I do think, though, what you said at the beginning is don't cancel and lose that time in front of your people, the time with your sponsors. It may not be perfect. And I totally believe there are things that we can do in the virtual environment that are better than what we can do in person sometimes. But doing nothing isn't the answer.
Yeah, I think that people are craving seeing other people more than ever. I mean, here we are about to enter the holidays, and people just want to hug someone and be in a room with someone. And this Zoom fatigue and the mental health crisis and the back end of all of this are just going to be insane. And I just, your heart goes out to so many people. And, the reality is our colleague Bruce Turkel said at one point in one of his blogs, everyone likes to say we're all in the same boat together. And as Bruce alluded to, no, we're not. I mean, we're in pretty good boats. We have homes, we have, our families are okay, their kids are in college, and there's a lot of people really struggling right now. And I have to remember that when we're, at home and complaining because we're not getting our full fee and we're not living that lifestyle, going from first class lounge to first class lounge in our previous lives, that, these are really tough times. And unfortunately the winter is coming, and it's going to, we're going to be locked down even more. But the vaccine is also coming. So I'm just, really optimistic for when we can get back out there.
So Ross, I have a belief that, and you're right, there's a lot of people who are suffering. I wrote a blog post called The Tale of Two Pandemics, because some people, they're like, oh, it's been so horrible, I've had to work from home. Their paycheck still comes, everything else is still the same. While other people, like in the restaurant industry or the hotel business or meeting planners or speakers, we've seen everything evaporate. And so one of my thoughts that really comes into this is meeting planners and the meetings they put on, whether it's corporate or association, as we come back, I think we have a big responsibility to help people transition back into the world, because it could be another 6 months to a year before we fully get back. But when we do, I think meetings play an important role. How do you think your clients play that role?
Yeah, you hit it on the head. I mean, we're the helpers, we're speakers. Our job is to help companies to be better, right? To help people to get over whatever challenges that are in their lives. And that's what we do. That's our gift. That's our superpower. So, convincing them that, no, you shouldn't cancel this for the short term where you might save some money, or, worry about being a super spreader event, is to help them understand, look, there's ways to do this responsibly. There are ways that you can do this where we can help you. I have a client next week in Chicago. It's a landscaping company out in New York. Their business was deemed essential. They're up 40% during COVID. They can't hire people fast enough. I mean, you had to get lucky. Certain industries are killing it. For us, we have to follow the money. It's not just hand sanitizer and toilet paper businesses. I mean, there's a lot of companies doing really well and have really made that pivot, but they couldn't meet in New York. They have different rules. So I was able to kind of talk it through and say, hey, let's meet in Chicago. That's a good, happy medium. Everyone's got a direct flight. So, I think you just have to really listen to what their challenges are and then walk them down. Hey, first choice, let's meet in person. Second choice, hybrid. Okay, then it's virtual. Way down, way at the bottom is cancel for next year, right? Because then you worry, well, people need this now. And that's the thing. And the sponsors need it now. I saw an interesting metric. It was an MPI survey about, I can't remember the context of it, but basically, and summarizing it poorly, they asked all the conference attendees, how many wanted to attend in person, and then they asked all the vendors, all the supplier, the trade show people who pay for the conference, and it was like 13% of attendees said they wanted to come, but like 97% of the vendors said they wanted to come. So you can see who's hurting, right? Who wants to be in person. So we need to find better events, and as speakers, it's our job to make them suck a whole lot less, and to help people understand that they can be fun and engaging, and we can do it responsibly, and that we can get back to work.
Absolutely. This has been amazing. Big Ten loyalties. We'll just stick with that. If somebody is watching this and said to themselves, oh my gosh, he is so cool. How do we get him at our event, in person, hybrid, virtual, however that works? How would they find you?
TomSinger.com.
That's where all of Ross's clients should go, without question.
Exactly. I have a website, rossbernstein.com. I have nothing to shill. I'm here because you guys were kind enough to ask me, and I'm super huge fans of yours and everything that you do for our association. You guys are rock stars. I'm not just saying that. You really are. I have such respect and admiration for both of you, and it is my honor to be a guest on your show. I've been a guest on Tom's podcast early on, but you guys, I'm proud to call you my friends, and I'm really, really grateful that you're doing this and how you're helping everyone by doing what you're doing. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for letting me be here today with you guys.
Thank you.
It was our pleasure. So we will be back on Wednesday next week. Monday, we're working with clients, but we'll be back on Wednesday with Lenora Billings-Harris talking about...
I'm so excited.
I know.
We've been trying to get her on the show for a while.
I know. She's going to talk about diversity. She's going to talk about sort of her worldview. When COVID hit, she was on a world cruise.
Who would want to be on a cruise ship when COVID hit?
And she has some good stories. So we're looking forward to that. Tom, where would they find us if they wanted to get a hold of us?
They can always go to webinartalkshow.com. You can also like our Facebook page, which is Webinar Talk Show. And we're going to keep bringing you these interviews because Eliz and I believe the interview format is what's missing from most webinars, conferences, and other meetings. And I think that the interview makes it just that much more engaging. So check us out, see all the cool people we've interviewed here. And if you'd like to talk to us about helping make your meeting better by interviewing your speakers, your experts, your industry superstars, we'd love to have that conversation.
We would, and we want to thank our industry superstar, Ross Bernstein, for being our guest today. We'll see you next week. Have a great day.
Bye, y'all.